Hi and welcome to another one of our videos, and today we're going to look at a couple of different exercises you can use with the barbell in a standing position. Sometimes these are referred to as landmine exercises. I just call them squat push or lunge push. Alright, so let's have a look at a couple of these. So we've got two barbells of the same length, and we've done Viking press before, which sort of simplifies it, but this sort of brings in a little bit more instability into both arms because obviously the barbell's like a free weight, it can move around a lot. So firstly, when you're adding the squat in there, you want to be pretty certain you can do a good squat. Mel's pretty good with this squat, so she's pretty good at angles on these. Got good ankle range, neutral posture. The barbell's not too low. You don't want the elbow, because what we'll often see is if the hand gets too low and it comes to there, if they're not in the right position, their shoulder will fall forward. It'll lurch around, and then they'll end up in this horrible posture like that. So that's often happens when they stand too close, or if they're too far away. All right, so there's a nice little point where you want to be just right. All right, now when you're coming up and you push up, you want to push pretty explosively, so you can end up in triple extension. So where you're pushing off the knee, the ankle, the knee, and the hip are all extending at the same time. So you end up in this real straight line. I often see people keep the feet flat on the ground. I never really understood that. It just doesn't really flow or make sense to me at all. If I'm going to push hard, why would I sort of stop the very last part of the movement, like jumping? It just makes no sense to me to do it that way. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong to keep the foot flat. It's just really inefficient to do it that way. All right, so that'll be one of the first ways you could do it. Then you can start adding different variations to the mix. Once you sort of go, obviously you could add load. That would make it significantly harder, but it's not always about making it heavier to make it harder. Sometimes it's about making it a little bit more complicated, really adding a different sort of part of the element to the brain and the core and all the different muscles to work in combination. And this is an example how you might do that. It looks quite easy, but when you try it, it's actually a lot harder than it looks, trying to get the opposite side and one hand to stay there. The hand you think that's not moving is actually still working pretty hard. And the coordination and the timing of it all is a lot different. So it's a different variation of the standard one that we would usually do. The other thing we could change is the stance. So going from a squat stance into a lunge stance definitely changes things. It sort of feels quite awkward. You can't quite finish it and lean forward into it as much as you can with the squat movement. And obviously it would load the front leg significantly more. All right, so it really does change things around a lot. In terms of the way that the reaction to the body and how you're sort of implementing different changes. And just like we did on the last one, we can start implementing these different, like an ipsilateral push, which would be this one, and then a contralateral push for the other side. And obviously you would begin to change legs and do different things with it as well. All right, so that's where you can sort of really muck around with two arm movements of the barbells. Then you can come back and do into single arm, which gives you a lot more freedom to move, and you really can go significantly more weight with this. You can add a little bit of rotation into it, just gives the body a little bit more freedom. So yeah, you can really make it a lot more athletic, I suppose you could say, as opposed to being really locked in. So standard version would just be standing still, probably my least preferred version. I might maybe stick with this with rehabilitation from shoulder problems, and I'm gradually easing into things, but generally speaking I want to add leg movements into it, and we've done plenty of videos before where we've added like a really athletic fast stuff, side to side movement, even wood chopping type things as well. But again, you just want to make sure you got the basic pushing pattern right, you've got the basic squatting pattern right before you start really messing around with things. So this time around we're going to start in the lunge stance with the single arm. So we're staying contralateral here. It's not wrong to do ipsilateral, but it's just way more efficient and more natural in this contralateral stance where the left arm's pushing with the right leg being the main stabilizer. So again, starting in your basic stance, and then you can, as the time goes on, then you get better at it. You can change where you can really add the movement into it as well. So Mel's just going to change sides here and go back to the squat push, where now we're going to add with this one arm. You can you'll really see here how she'll get a little bit more rotation right at the bottom there. Our hips will sort of swivel around a bit, and that's that freedom I was talking about before, and just gives you a lot more power through the movement to really push through. You can really push a significantly greater amount with one arm versus two arm. All right, and then you switch hands. You can come back and you can change sides, and this way you can go back to that lunge one where she was standing statically still, now adding a leg movement into it, so just like we did with the two arm before. But again, it gives you a little bit more freedom. You actually usually feel like you want to lift that trailing leg off the ground when you do this one. It just instinctively it feels like the right thing to do. But they're all great exercises you can use, that obviously integrating the upper body and lower body together, really adding a bit of complexity into it. Load isn't always the way to challenge things. Sometimes these complex maneuvers really shake things up in your training. It can be quite useful for avoiding pattern overload, which is where you're really hammering the same muscles, tendons, joints in the same angles with the same things all the time. Just by changing something like this, you can avoid those sort of overuse injuries and continue to gain strength without the aggravation that sometimes the standard movements create. All right, so I hope this video gives you some ideas, and you can really mix it into your training and see how you go. All right, I'll see you on our next video.